Okay, so last time what we were discussing in this book, the Sefer, was about the importance of Kabbalah in terms of understanding the large picture of history. It's about the big picture versus the small picture. The big picture incorporates everything. I mean, as much as you possibly can. Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod, the four levels of Torah, the simplest understanding, Remez, the hints, Drush, which of course are the in general the exegetical teachings, the drush, the medrash, all the different. It's the story behind the story. A lot of times depends on the halacha. Drush is basically one of the resources we use to learn out different sources or different verses for halachas that are known. And Sod, of course, is Kabbalah in every respect, the secrets. And as the pasuk says, Sod Hashem l'Rav, it's the secrets of Hashem to those who fear Him. There's an example in the Gemara, a few cases where a certain Tana was asked a question, a certain halacha, and the halacha basically depended upon having certain experience because it wasn't recorded, it wasn't written down, and it was a metzias, a certain reality. And if you didn't have the experience it, you wouldn't know what the reality was. The halacha needed to know the answer, and nobody had that experience because it wasn't, without going to specifics, it wasn't part of anybody's experience at that point in time. And certain Tana, who he had the answer, he knew what it was, and the Gemara says, how did he know? Was it just a lucky guess? Obviously, it wasn't a lucky guess because halacha does not depend upon lucky guesses at all. And basically, Gemara answers by saying, Sod Hashem Riyaf, that when a person has fear of God, when a person is doing the right thing, a person is learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, the Shem Shemayim, even the Shem Shemayim, even simpler people who don't have a lot of background have come up with tremendous insights and understandings about life and things because they have a certain sincerity. There's a certain basis that Hashem looks from a person, that Hashem will give a person an insight. An insight, as the Gemara points out, everybody has their place in Torah, everybody has their time, everybody has a specific insight that will come through them, through an experience, whatever the case may be. But the bottom line is if somebody has fear of God, if somebody has a desire to know truth, to practice truth, to live by truth, they will get tremendous yet to the Shmaya from Hashem to be able to understand things beyond their capacity. I mean, Nevuah, prophecy worked very much the same way. Prophecy basically was a person got as far as they could in terms of learning. I mean, the brain has a certain capacity, there's a certain time limit. You can only certain things based upon what you're learning. But sometimes the situation requires that people know more than that. Prophecy meant knowing the future. Prophecy meant knowing things that were hidden from people's eyes and people's minds and people's ears. So Kosh Baruch Hu would fill in the gaps. And he would give it specifically to people who had the proper midot, the proper traits. And this goes back, ultimately speaking, to the fourth verse of the Chumash, where it says that Hashem is Mavdil ben Or LaChoshech, calling the light day and the darkness night. And Rashi says, what's his Havdalah that Hashem did? Obviously, the Pashut, Pshat of the Pasuk is that the Havdalah was separating the light and the darkness itself. But as Rashi points out, brings down the Gemara, that really this was a special light. It was a supernal light. It was the Or Ganuz. The original light of creation that was far more powerful than any physical light we have in the world today, whether it's sunlight, incandescent light, whatever the case may be. And Rashi says, and the Gemara says, that Hashem looked into history and saw how down the road, once Rishon came into existence, and it didn't take very long. I mean, Cain was there the first day, right? It was about 50 days after they left the Garden of Eden that he actually murdered his brother. So evil got in there pretty quickly. And before that, we have the Eitz Das Tov Ra, the tree of knowledge, good and evil, which basically, it's right there at the beginning. I mean, the Yitzhahar is right there. So Hashem saw how this light would be abused by the Rishayim, so therefore he hid it. And most people's understanding, and from the Gemara seems to be mashma that way, and certainly that's the way I assumed, that it's a light that's hidden for the future, at a time in Yemos HaMashiach, after all the evil people of history have been brushed away and are gone. So then Hashem says, all the survivors, you guys are all righteous, now you get this light. But the Leshem explains not like that. The Leshem explains that really the hiding of the light meant that from that point onward, only somebody with the proper traits, with the proper vessel, a person is the proper vessel for the light of Hashem. The light of Hashem is holy, very holy, extremely holy. It's meant only for good. It can't be abused. It's bad enough we can profane the world as much as we already profane it. But this light is very, very special. So therefore, Kosh Baruch Hu made it that this light could not be abused, and therefore would only flow down to a person whose midas, whose traits would allow it to, would come to the person like a magnet, and you can pour as much water into a container as you want, but if the container is closed from the top, it's just going to flow right off it or bounce right back, at the person pouring it. So likewise, if a person does not have the proper traits, then you're not going to have Sod Hashem Yirav. That's what it means. That's the Sod of Sod Hashem Yirav. That's the deeper meaning of that pasuk. That from that point onward, from Maaseh Bereshis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that only people with the proper traits, the proper background. It doesn't make a difference how much money you donate to some Kabbalah place, someplace, and how much you get involved in their programs and all that. The bottom line is the people teaching it and the people learning it. You can't break the rule. There's no way around it. There's no loophole in any respect. Sod Hashem L'Ri'av, and without that information, so a person could say, okay, fine. So I don't qualify, right? I don't get it, right? So I can't sit in business class in the end, but there's still economy class. What do I care as long as the food, works? I can still chew it, and So the answer is not like that. And that's the reason why Jewish history has not been a party in any sense of the term, meaning that we've had a rough time of it, and we've missed the point. As much as we have been able to understand so much about halacha and medrash and so much of the background behind the stories of the Torah and the halacha and all the various aspects of everyday technical life, that when you do an analysis of Jewish history, there's one big black mark and hole that stands out that you just can't miss. And that is every 60, 70 years, the Jewish people go through some terrible upheaval, some terrible situation that usually results in disaster. An undoing of all the good that was done until that point in time, all the mitzvahs of the mitzvahs, but to build up yeshivas only to watch them get torched and destroyed, to build up Talmid Chachamim, and to invest so much time and energy, Mesiras Nefesh, into Torah learning, only to watch people get murdered and killed, and in the worst way possible. I mean, like the heroes of Judaism. You just look at the Gemara about the Asur Harukas Malchus, the ten martyrs who died at the hands of the Romans, that and connected back to the sale of Yosef, which we'll see is all part of this whole presentation. I mean, that's the backbone of this presentation of drowning a Pshat is really obviously the backbone of Jewish history, because that's what this book is about. This book is about trying to make sense of Jewish history and create that big picture in the way that we can see what's going on today, so we don't miss the signs again, that we can respond to growing anti-Semitism and pressure on the Jewish people and losing pieces of Eretz Yisrael, which has happened last week, that we shouldn't have to deal with situations like that. As much as we get international acclaim and even the Palestinian, whose land it was, had nice things to say about the Jews and things like that, who got involved in this, but this is our land, it's not his land. Even if he had a deed, more than likely that deed may have gone back to 1929 when they murdered Jews and pushed them out, and all the protests, and go back far enough. It's Jewish land. Why are we being subjected to things like this, and why we have to go through all of this, and why we have to live with the fear of Iran launching nuclear missiles and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That's Jewish history. Why can't we simply do what has to be done to end this thing already? We're waiting for redemption, but we're bringing exile. And the Gemara gives us the options, and it comes down to Sod Hashem Riyah, right? That basically we have to put in perspective all not just the halacha, not just the midrashim, but the whole story, the big picture. And the big picture incorporates not just what's going on inside the Torah itself, like literally in the panimis of Torah, inside aspect of Torah, but includes also what's going on historically. The things that took place. Last week we mentioned the quote about Harry Truman, President Truman. That's part of the story of Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people, and Geula, and all the Cyrus, Koresh, who played a major role back in the time of the Second Temple, right? And the whole story of Achashverosh and Nebuchadnezzar. We see that people outside the Jewish people have what to contribute to Jewish history, for better for worse, and you can't ignore that. I mean, we try to ignore that. We try to go about our business as if it doesn't make a difference, but somehow it comes knocking at the door later on. Somehow it, if we don't answer the door, then it breaks it down and overwhelms us, and we're forced to deal with the reality of history. We didn't want to deal with the Nazis, we didn't want to deal with Hitler, Yimach Shmo, or anybody like that. We wanted to just mind their own business, which is what we did. And we thought that somehow by doing that, if we learn more Torah, do more mitzvahs, and somehow that would take care of the problem. And sometimes, in some cases, that's all it takes. But other times, the demands of history are much greater, much greater. And they go beyond the everyday activities of the average Torah Jew. And you have to know when, and you have to know what, and you have to know how to deal with it. And that's where you have to go the distance. You have to go the final distance from Pshat to Remez to Drush Sod. And this is the example. So, this is a Sod. This is from a Sefer that is one. The Zohar itself has various different sections. The Zohar is made up, and the principal part of the Zohar that most people are familiar with is basically on the Parsha. It's deeper. It's like Medrash, but it's obviously more Kabbalistic. Every once in a while, there's terminology that's thrown in that unless you have a background in Kabbalah, you won't even recognize the terms at all. And it requires a perush. There are a few perushim on it, some better than others. Personally, I find the Matokli Dvash is one of the best I've used up until now. It's very good. There are other also good ones, but that's the principal part of the Zohar itself. But there are other aspects of the Zohar which are far more Kabbalistic. For example, there's Sefer Snusa, which is like the Hidden Sphira, or you have Idra Rabbi, Idra Zuta, and they show up in different parts of the Zohar. All of a sudden, in a particular parsha, Parshas Naso, or Parshas Kisisa, all of a sudden the Zohar will stop what it's doing and go strictly into these sections of Kabbalah, which are basically the most technical aspects of Kabbalah, the most Kabbalistic aspects of Kabbalah, and they deal with all the information that we have available to us, is known as a tradition, because you can't make this stuff up, there's no way, that what Hashem did to make creation up until creation as we know it. The Chumash itself, that begins with Ma'aseh Bereshis, is the middle of the movie. It's the middle of the story. You're walking in, everybody else has been watching, and you come with your popcorn, you sit down, it's the middle of the movie, right? What happened up until now, right? Well, I don't know, I also came in late. So Kabbalah, deals with all that which took place until that point in time. Obviously, Kabbalah will address things after, but the strict, the most pure aspects of Kabbalah deal with everything up until Ma'aseh Bereshis, as far back as we can possibly go. That's in these sections. These particular sections of the Zohar, that's where you find it, unless you have a Rebbe, unless you have a tradition, or you're unique like the Arizal, or you have visitations from Eliyahu Navi, which is not so common today. Once upon a time it was more common, but unless you have the background, there's no way. It's like Kivyocha, it's like opening up quantum mechanics for the first time without much of a background in physics at all. It's not going to make sense. The words might be there, you might recognize some of the letters, but it's in Aramaic most of the time, and it's just too complicated. And that's what these sections deal with. You have other sections called Rei Mehemna, which is also it's midrashic, but it's very deep. It's deeper than the regular Zohar very often. And it also just shows up all of a sudden in different sections of the Zohar. And Rei Mehemna means the faithful shepherd. The tradition is that Moshe Benu himself, whatever form he came back, taught these things to the Rashbi. You have Medrash Nelam, again, which is another aspect of the Zohar. It's midrashic as well, but again, very deep. And depending upon the section, a lot of insights come out that are very, very important, that are very hidden for a long time. And we'll see. What's amazing about this is how hidden they can actually be, and yet how crucial they can actually be. And you figure something as important as this particular point or this particular point, why is it not out in the open? Why is it not there for everyone to see, to everyone to know? Because it has so much to say about everyday life, and in fact, it's the not knowing of it that's endangering us. So there's a few answers. Sometimes it's a question of timing. A lot of times it's a question of merit. The Jewish people are meriting it. If we are taking Pardes seriously, as the Arizal pointed out, that everybody's mechuyev to go and learn Pardes as much as possible, then we come to it. It's like built into the system. When the Gemara says if they merit it, achishena, the gula will come early and pleasantly. If they don't merit it, bita, and will come running in a donkey, which means not so pleasant. That's all part of meriting it. Meriting it means that the Jewish people are focused, and they're mechake lo, they're ready for Mashiach to come, and it's a peaceful Yeshua, all the things they're supposed to do from a historical perspective. So then we will merit to have the people find these things and reveal it to the nation. We'll merit to come across them somehow. Hashem wants us to know something. he finds a way to tell it to us. Sod Hashem Ariyav. Right? The secrets of Hashem to those who fear him. Fear him, the Ramchal explains, doesn't simply mean fear of punishment. It means basically looking at reality the way Hashem sees reality. There ought to see. Right? So for those people who are prepared to look at history the way Hashem wants history to be seen, Hashem will find a way to reveal these things to them, and everybody who needs to know will somehow come across it. Will somehow know. If we don't know it, it's because we didn't merit it, and we paid the price for it. So, the Gra says the following thing. It's the Vilna Gaon's commentary on the Sefer Tznusa Sefer. He says, no, that each day of creation corresponds to 1,000 years of history, that every event that occurred during these days will correspond to an event that will occur at the proportionate moment in time during the respective millennium. What does it mean? You know, you look at history, and there's the 6 days of Ma'aseh Bereshis. What happened before that? Only Mekubalim know for sure, right? What happened after that? Well, there's the first 1,000 years, controversial. The Torah has its commentary. Western history is kind of a blank. They sort of work backwards, reverse engineering, to try to figure out what was going on in the early stages. They have all kinds of theories based upon dating and different tests that they take. There wasn't much of history that was recorded. Most of the history that was written at the beginning was written by the kings, and most people were illiterate, and it was mostly made up to try to support the idea the king was either God or was appointed by a god at some point in time, and for the most part, it was fabricated. Not until Josephus came along and the Romans did they actually start to report history in a more accurate way, and from that point onward, history becomes more detailed and more accurate. But the first 1,000 years, whatever it was. The second, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, we're now holding the 6th millennium based upon the story from creation. Is there any connection to the 6 days of creation? And how do events unfold? Everything, of course, is a shkacha pratis. We all hold, at least from a Torah perspective, that everything is a function of divine providence. Nothing is random. Nothing can happen by accident. We don't believe in coincidence. The Gemara says specifically that a person doesn't even raise his finger, stub his finger, unless Shemayim dictates that should happen. That's our perspective. There's no such thing as accidents. As much as it may look like it, Hester Panim, the hiding of God's face, just means that God will make things appear like it's random sometimes to either give a person a chance to see the hand of God in history and use his free will to do that, or to throw the person off because they choose to walk on the wrong path. And Shemayim basically says, you sleep in the bed that you make. You want to ignore me? Fine, I'll make it that you can't even see me. The Paro keeps going, Mi Hashem, Mi Hashem. And the Egyptians are going, it's like, and Moshe's going, and Paro's going, who, what, where, it's like, even when he admits it, he can't stick with his admission at the end because he's blocked. Right? His own intellectual approach to life and the assumptions that he lives with blocks him from being able to connect to the truth. But we hold everything, without exception, is the function of Hashgacha Pratis, is divine providence. Right? But in terms of things unfolded historically, what's it like? It's like a river that simply flows from one location down to another location, and once the water leaves that spot, it doesn't go back there again. There's no repetition. There's no connection to the previous moment, except for the fact that it came after the previous moment and is connected to the next moment because it comes before it. Or is there some kind of idea that history repeats itself? I mean, people say that. People feel that the history tends to repeat itself. The fact that in Parshas Azinu that Hashem says, learn from history because these are the patterns that will teach you about how to read the signs when things are going right and things are going wrong. Right? So there seems to be some kind of indication that history does repeat itself on some level. But we don't live our lives like that. And this is telling you, the Gra is telling you, it is definitely that way. That he's telling you that right now that the same way that you have DNA that basically dictates how you're going to age and how your body's going to grow and what muscles you're going to have and your metabolism and whether you'll be weak or strong or vulnerable to some things and some people are not vulnerable to basically. That's all encoded in your physical DNA. You can never be more, short of genetic engineering, of being more than your DNA allows you to be physically. Chances are a person will die and leave this world without having fulfilled all the potential that's inside their DNA. But whatever you are going to be, it's rooted there. So the Gra is saying there's such a concept when it comes to history as well. He says that each day of creation corresponds to 1,000 years of history. The first day of creation corresponds to the first 1,000 years of history. The second day of creation corresponds to the second millennium of history. The third day of creation, the third millennium. To finally, the sixth day corresponds to the sixth millennium. We're living in a millennium from 5,000 to 6,000, the sixth millennium, that corresponds to the sixth day of creation. Okay, it's a nice idea. It's new, right? Didn't hear it before. I mean, it makes sense. But as the Gemara says, my nafkamina, right? What's the practical difference? What do I gain from it? Why do I have to know that, right? Why is that going to change anything? Why is it so important for me to be able to figure out, that this is the case? Like, how does it change my life? How does it change history? How does it save the Jewish people historically? It's been a very hot summer for you. There's much bigger cups these days. But what difference does it make? So it's the Gra's telling you, and he does actually go on to say that first of all, it's right in that same section where he points out that if you understood what I had just told you until now, you could figure out when Mashiach is supposed to come. So, I looked at it and I looked around and I still haven't quite figured out what he's talking about, what he's actually referring to, that's going to tell you. But more than likely it has to do with the fact that, in fact, I'll even go so far as to say that it's based upon this very same idea. That everything that happens in the course of a millennium, as he says, is based upon an event that happened during the 6 days of creation. Things happen a specific time, a specific way on the first day of creation. They gave rise to all the events taking place during the first millennium. Like DNA. That's the root. This happened at this time, right? So this happened during the course of the millennium. Now, how do you figure out at what point during the millennium? A millennium is 1,000 years long, and a day is 24 hours long. Okay, it could be that 24 hours compared to where you're in the universe, based upon, from God's perspective, our perspective, at the edge of the universe, it might be equal to 8 billion years. On Earth, it's 24 hours, but the Pshat of the Torah is each day is 24 hours long, whatever those days are. Kabbalistically speaking, also, we hold that time in the beginning until Adam fell as a result of the Chet was different quality of time. That 1 hour to Adam Arishon before the Chet is much different to 1 hour after the Chet, because in the level of its silos up there, time has a different quality. So therefore, it confirms and works perfect with the idea that time is relative, meaning that even though the Torah reports that this hour this took place and that hour this took place, but the actual span of time, according to Kabbalah, would be equal to a lot more of our time than 1 hour of our time is equal to. So even though 1 hour today is equal to 60 minutes, those 60 minutes could equal 200 years prior to the Chet. But it's still called 1 hour. Still called 1 hour. Still called an hour. And that's all the concerns is. So if you wanted to figure out, although the truth is that would create a certain problem in this respect, but if you wanted to figure out what 1 hour is equal to, it's very simple. You take 1,000 years and you divide by 24, which is equal to 43.66. And I did not do that off the top of my head. I worked it out before in advance. I wish I could do that to the mathematics off the top of my head, but
so why do we lock in on 24? Because the first day we know is 36 hours according to the Yerushalmi, and
No, the Rishonim doesn't say that. The Rishonim doesn't even top of the first day. The first day, every day is 24 hours long. Every day is 24 hours long. But the Rishonim
there's
just
two references. One is the first day was 36 hours, and the other one was the first Shabbat was 36 hours.
No. And what it says, the Rishonim, is that the Ganuz came back from Arishon to shine for him for 36 hours.
Right.
12 hours of Erev Shabbos, and the 24 hours of Shabbos itself.
Okay, that was Shabbat, the first day.
No, 24 hours long. Every day is 24 hours long. There's no Yerushalmi that you have to show it to me. There's no Yerushalmi that says, as far as I know, 36 hours long, because every day had to be, by definition, was 24 hours long. That's the way we do the Gra. I mean, I've never seen a source otherwise. But you can show me. There's always a possibility. But the point is that going with 24 hours, divide by 24, so you get 43.66 hours. Sorry, 1 hour of Ma'aseh Bereshis would be equal to 43.66 years in a millennium. 1,000 divided by 24 yields 43.66. So therefore, whatever happened, let's say, within the first hour of Ma'aseh Bereishis, would create something that's going to happen during the first 43.66 years of the first millennium. Whatever happened in the second hour of Ma'aseh Bereishis is going to result in some kind of corresponding creation, not the exact same thing, but something that's similar to it, at least in theme, at least in the root of what had taken place. It's less easy to see this on the first day, because on the first day God just making light and separating the light from the darkness and all that, and it's a day of chesed. But it becomes easier to see this as we go further into creation, as more specific creations are being made hour by hour. So that's the way that the basic calculation works. So the Gra is telling you that whatever is taking place in the course of a particular hour, in Ma'aseh Bereishis is going to be the root, the basis of an event in the corresponding period of time. So if something happened during the fifth day of creation, for example, the creation of animals took place, in whatever hour it took place, let's just say, we don't know, because the Gemara doesn't tell us that, and the Torah also doesn't tell us specifically which hour, but let's just say guessing took place on the 10th hour that day, or actually more like the 15th hour that day. So then all you have to do is do 43.66 year periods of time to find the corresponding period of time. And if you look at history in that 43.66 year window of time, you should be able to trace the events of that period of history back to that hour of Ma'aseh Bereishis. Just like you could trace gray hair back to a specific gene in the or the lack of it for that matter, in a person's body. This doesn't just randomly show up like at the top of the head, like there's no connection between the body where somehow the hair says, no, now that we're out here, let's go gray. It's like, well, what are the instructions? I don't know. No one's talking. It's spoken even in a long time. And it's like, no, there are instructions. The body's talking to the hair the whole time. The body's talking to your skin cells. It's all encoded. It's all rooted in the DNA itself. So likewise, whatever is happening historically is going to be rooted back an event in Ma'aseh Bereishis. Okay. Having established that point, that changes everything all of a sudden. Because even though, for the most part, people look at the mistake of eating from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, from eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as being something that's, it's passé, been there, done that, it's over, it's gone. It's like, we're all paying for it. It's our ancestor. Adam HaRishon was the ancestor of all ancestors, and we're still in exile 5,772 years later and still paying for it, but we're also in the Roman exile. Now, the Jewish people have since become a nation going, on time, right? That no longer does that event have an effect on us, other than the fact that it caused us to go into exile. Says the Gra, you're wrong. You are so wrong. You are tragically wrong. Because not only is it not in the past, but it's in the future. It's going to come around again, or the present for that matter. How do you find out? Well, we just do our calculation. You have to find out, first of all, when the Adam HaRishon ate the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that's a very significant moment in time, because that changed everything. That changed all of history. We're still paying for that. That's the major mistake. All of the mistakes are subsets, right? They're just like branches off that first mistake. Without that mistake, we'd still be sitting right now in the Garden of Eden, enjoying paradise. We wouldn't have exile. There wouldn't even be a Jewish people, because all of mankind that would have existed would be the Jewish people. Everything would be perfect, the way it's supposed to be. One choice that was made improperly. So therefore, all of history is about rectifying that mistake. But it's in the past. Or is it? Says the Gra, no. Something is going to happen in the future that's going to be rooted in that particular mistake. And that's highly significant. Because at the point of history is rectification, tikkun olam, rectifying the world, rectifying the mistakes of the past. The point of history is to right that which is wrong. There's no wrong to be righted more than that chet, that mistake. But how can you do it? If it's after the fact, we left the Garden of Eden. It's like, we don't even know what it is. We don't even know exactly what happened. Says the Gra, because it will come around again. It's going to come around again. In some form. Not that we're all going to find ourselves one day in the Garden of Eden and saying, hey, what happened over here? It's like, look, that looks a lot like the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Not that we know what it looks like, but it's not going to happen. It's going to be a facsimile. Some modern day projection and representation of that mistake, and will go through the whole test all over again, not as one individual, but as mankind, because all of mankind came from Adam Rishon. We're all part of who he was. So therefore, through us, we will be able to somehow rectify the mistake. That's what the Gra is saying. It will come around again. That's hugely important. All of world history, therefore, and all the events, World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, whatever it is that's taken place in history, is somehow tied to that event. It's all about fixing that mistake. And here we're rushing in time, and though it was an event totally in the past, it turns out that because it was on day 6, and day 6 corresponds to the 6th millennium, and that happened well into the the 6th day, it could happen well into the 6th millennium. So all of a sudden, the event of the past now becomes the event of the future. All of a sudden, with tremendous consequences and implications. So how do you figure out when the moment of time that corresponds to the Yetzer Das Tavara actually is? So again, you divide 1,000 by 24, 43.66, and all you need to know is when Adam HaRishon ate from the Yetzer Das Tavara. So you run back to your Chumash, and you scour the pages, and you go back and forth, and you read Rashi and Ramban and everybody, and you can't find a clue. It just tells you that Adam was created, Adam and the animals, Adam had a wife, etc., right? He got married, went for supper, and he eats in the Yetzer Das Tavara. There's Kain and Hevel, but what time? What time? It's not in the Chumash. So the Gemara says, yeah, we do know. We do know. In the Masorah, fortunately, for the other 5 days we don't know what happened at what time. But on the 6th day of creation, things happen on a very orderly and hourly basis. In the Gemara, in Sanhedrin, on Lamaches Amad Base, goes through each hour what God was doing. And it turns out that Adam HaRishon ate from the 10th hour on day 6 of Ma'aseh Bereshis, and that would correspond to, technically speaking, you take one day by it was actually the 10th hour of daylight hours, right? Because a Jewish day is divided 2 parts. The night comes first, 12 hours of night, and 12 hours of day, right? And so you just the chet did not take place at night. So you have to assume when the Gemara says the 10th hour, it's talking the 10th hour of daytime. So therefore, if you do the projection, since the first 500 years would correspond to the first half of the day, the correlation, so that means the first half corresponds to night. So really the 10th hour would be the 22nd hour. Sorry, the 22nd hour. 12 hours of nighttime plus 10 hours of daytime, and that's when Adam would have eaten, which is well into our future. So not even today. I don't actually going to have Pshat. We have it over there. Does actually have it here? Yes, we do have it here. That would be the. We are right now in the 19th hour, so that would come another 120 some odd years after us, well into our future. So, what does that mean for us? So it turns out that's only one sod. We need another one. A very important sod. The Lashon says the following thing. In the Sefer called Drushi El Matahu, also Kabbalah, it says in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer that one day for the Holy One, blessed is He, corresponds to 12 hours of a day, since no creation occurred at night, as it says in Bereshis Rabbah. Right? In fact, the Rokeach has a nice little remiss to this, nice little hint. We say in the Torah itself, Baruch finished creating the heavens and the earth, right? All the components basically. And the word Vayechulu, which could be written with an extra vav, is actually missing one vav. And the gematria Vayechulu without the vav is 72. So Rokeach says, because to tell you that since God only created during the daytime hours, as the Medrash says, 6 times 12. When did God Vayechulu? When did He finish? After 6 days of 12 hours each. 6 times 12 is 72. So Leshem says that for this comparison, even though it's true that each day was 24 hours long, and that the daytime, the nighttime comes first, followed by the daytime. For this particular comparison, for this particular equation that we're dealing with right now, to try to find corresponds between events of Ma'aseh Bereshis and later on in history, that we don't work with 24 but 12. Why? Because since we're dealing with events, the whole millennium, it's not like the first 500 years, nothing happened. And every millennium, right? It's not like, the whole place went dark and went to sleep. The creation was just shut off for 12 hours, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, in 5500, the whole world woke up and things began to happen. Events were happening during the first 500 years, just like they would happen during the second 500 years. So therefore, as it says in Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar, and the lesson brings down, that for this particular comparison, we do not divide 1,000 by 24, but rather we divide 1,000 by 12, because we're looking for events corresponding during the whole 1,000 years, which can only correspond to events during the 12 hours of daylight creating, because that's the only time that God was creating, for the comparison. So therefore, that's clear? When you divide 1,000 by 12, you actually get 83.33 years. So in terms of this particular setup, an equation, the 1 hour of creating of Ma'aseh Bereshis corresponds to 83.33 years in a millennium. That's the way it works. So now it changes everything. Absolutely changes everything. Because as it turns out, that if you take 10 hours, so to speak, of 83.33 years of the sixth millennium, starting from 5,000, you take 83.33, that's the first hour. Another 83.33, that's the second hour. Another 83.33, and you keep adding them up, you get to the beginning of the 10th hour, that corresponds to not 120 years from today, it corresponds to actually 22 years in the past. It corresponds to 1990, 5750. I mean, that was an easy thing to say, although it's a little tired, but that was easy to get the words out. The significance is much, much greater, is way more profound. I mean, this is a point to be contemplated, for a long period of time, because basically what it's telling us is that as of 1990, that was a history changer. Something significant and major of phenomenal historical importance took place in whether you recognize it or not, whether you saw it, whether you paid attention, whether you noted it, it doesn't make a difference. As of 1990, 5750, a period of time corresponding to the 10th hour of day 6 when Adam Arishon ate from the 8th of Das Tovara, that corresponds to this period of time we call the 10th hour of the 6th millennium. For 83.33 years, which are now 5772, which means we're now 22 years since that time, into the 10th hour of creation, during which Adam Arishon ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We are the first generation, as of 1990, to be living in a period of time corresponding to the sin, the mistake that mankind made way back at the beginning, which means our generation off the bat is more fitting for tikkun than any other generation until now, at this period of time. I mean, there's 228 years left of history until 6,000. It's a lot of time. But this is the period of time right now. Whatever happens after this 10th hour, after this 83.33 year period of time, is something else. But this is the period of tikkun right now, at this stage of history, because it corresponds to that time. The Gra says whatever's taking place in this millennium, from 1990 onward, is based upon what happened in the 10th hour of day 6. So, when I saw this, I thought, okay, what does it mean? Is there anything I can see and that would indicate the truth of this statement? Somehow, the same way, for example, that if you look at somebody who looks, you see two people walking together and they look like brothers, you assume there's a connection, right? You can look at one, look at the other, and say, you guys brothers or cousins or something, right? You see a father walking next to a boy who happens to have the same color hair, the same facial expression, you assume there's a connection, right? So likewise, if you see history of day 6, the 10th hour, and the eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the whole thing has to do with knowledge of good and evil, and that's the whole test. It could have been a test of don't eat the fruit, period. What kind of fruit is it? Banana, right? That's adama. Let's say it really was an apple. It wasn't, right? But let's say it was. It could have been. God could have said, don't eat this apple. Why? Because I say so. I want to see how obedient you can be. God doesn't do that. He says, it's not about the fruit. It's about the das, tov ra. It's about knowledge of good and evil. It's about knowledge. So, I don't remember how far back I saw this, but I started to look around, and I thought to myself, it's very interesting. Because if I had to describe, and goes back to like 1996, 7, 8, when I first saw this, maybe even a little bit later, even around 97, 98, I think I must have seen this. And I thought to myself, it's interesting because the internet really is a modern day version of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I mean, the truth is, at that point in time, the evil wasn't so apparent. It wasn't being abused like it's being abused today. There wasn't, the alarms going off, not in the secular world, certainly not in the religious world yet, basically, because people had yet to come to terms with, how they could use it for bad. The good was being, developed already, and people, saw it in terms of medicine and just in terms of, I don't even when Google began, but the search engines in the beginning, if you recall, were very slow and arduous, but they were better than nothing. But it was clear, it had that potential, and I thought to myself, interesting, when did this thing come into reality? Because it happened pretty recently, right? And I thought to myself, take a look it up, and I did, and sure enough, it went public in 1990. Literally the beginning of the 10th hour. And what was even more interesting was that Newsweek, because of it, ran an article, and the headline of his article on the front page was, Generation of Knowledge. That's what it called. We are the generation of knowledge. The internet has become the generation of knowledge. And I remember when I used to go lecturing at the beginning, back in early, 2000, before that, even before Y2K, and that period of time, and I would talk about this and go through this presentation, talk about how the internet was literally rooted, because it has to be. Everything today, no matter what you believe. I mean, we as Jewish people, anyhow, believe whatever is taking place today is rooted back in my Bereshis. So something has to have a root. The same a person could say, I don't believe, in ancestry. But the reality is, anybody walking in today, short of, let's say, being a test-tube baby, is somebody who came from parents, right? They were born from parents, and there's like genes, and there's hereditary stuff going on, and you can trace it back, and you can trace it back even 2 generations. There are times where illnesses or traits can even skip generations. They can go back to grandparents and great-grandparents, and likewise, anything happening historically today, or any time for that matter, has to be traceable. Not just back to the previous generation, but all the way back to my Bereshis. Just like, for example, the halach of covering the hair can be traced back to Sota. But the same way over here, that there's a reality. It's called the internet, the World Wide Web, right? So if you're looking back at day 6, and you're looking for a shorish, a root for an event like that, what are you going to pick? The snake, right? What are you going to pick? The creation of Chava, the formation of man. Right, the naming of the animals, like what? Looking for something very similar to what What is it? What is about knowledge, about good and evil? What is there? There's only one thing: the Eisadas Tovara, like spot on, exactly. It blew me away. you couldn't get. There are things in life where you have to fudge it sometimes to make it work. It's close, but not exactly. But it's close enough to say. But this is exactly right on. Historically, exactly right on. A tree of knowledge of good and evil. Today, you don't have to convince anybody of that. It's really not in the Torah world. Today, if anything, it's more like a tree of evil than the tree of good. But you can't disregard the good. The good is obviously there. It is mamish and eitadas tovara. And it's not a coincidence. The Gra says they're connected. They're rooted. So, if this is the case with the Gra saying, then maybe you could even say the following thing. That when he says, if having understood what I just told you, putting into perspective what I just explained to you, and seeing how it plays itself out, now we have an example in life that literally fits the bill completely. You can figure out the arrival of Mashiach. So if you think to yourself, well, what would be if Mashiach is going to come at a specific moment in history, that also has to be rooted back in day 6 or day 5 or day 4. If Mashiach can come at any point in time, there has to be some aspect of every day that could give rise to Mashiach. But obviously the flavor will change from millennium to millennium, just like it would from day to day. So now we're already holding in the 6th day of creation and the 6th millennium. So what about the 6th day could possibly be the root of Mashiach? So it's interesting, Chazal point out, and they make a point of this, the gematria, what a coincidence, right? The gematria of Nachash and Mashiach are the same. What a coincidence. Nachash is so different from Mashiach, right? Nachash is like, he's like the bad guy. He's the left, right? I mean, politically speaking, right? And the Mashiach is like he's all the way to the right. How can we compare them? Because we have a rule that every moment of history that ends up being in exile had to have the potential to be redemption. Think about it for a second. Let's say the Nachash, in fact, had tempted Chava, and Chava tried to tempt her husband, and nobody ate. What would have been the result? Shabbos would have come in, and that would have been the Gula at that point in time. What would have been the heroic moment? What would be the moment that they'd be talking about, at the festive dinner on Shabbos night, talking about how finally Mashiach has come and history has come to an end, and God is so proud of His creation, His complete. What is that moment that they're going to show, video replay in slow motion over and over again, not on Shabbos, but after Shabbos, right? That changed everything. What's that fantastic moment? The moment he said, no, I will not eat. I really want to. It's really tempting, but I'm not going to eat. That's the moment. That would be the moment of Gula. At that moment, you overcome. Just like for a person who's trying to quit smoking or trying to stick to a diet, right? And they really want that piece of chocolate cake. They really want it, right? And they say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And they make up a decision, and they have the resolve, and that's the moment of Geula, right there. Because until they make that, that's the most phenomenal thing about life. It's a big lesson about life. That often the most difficult moments come down to a single decision. Just the moment you make the decision, it's amazing how much personal strength you draw after that. It goes away. Because Amalek, and here's the rule of life, Amalek can only attack a person where they have suffering. Doubt. The gematria of Amalek is doubt. As long as there's a possibility that you're still open to the sin, he'll attack you. At the moment he sees you have perfect resolve, I will not do this chet, he leaves you alone. You're free. And the rest of the night, it doesn't bother you. Now the cheesecake's the problem. Right? But the chocolate cake is over for now, right? Better off to leave the chasna early and go get a salad. But that's how it works with human resolve. That's the moment. Which means basically the Nachash could have been the vehicle for redemption, not just exile. We chose exile by listening to him and eating from the Eitzadas Tov. So therefore, by resisting him, Adam would have been Mashiach instead, and that's what they're the same gematria. So it didn't happen at the first moment. So historically, it's going to happen at the end that what the Nachash brought upon mankind, Mashiach will have come to end. That's the connection. Which means, if we're saying this whole connection is true, and it is, that if you knew the exact moment in the 6th day that Adam failed that test, where he could have passed it, but he failed it instead, and you knew where that moment was, and you could translate that moment into a period of time somewhere, or a moment in history in the 6th millennium, you'll know the arrival date of Mashiach. Which, just off the cuff, some say it's supposed to be this year, but we won't talk about that right now, right? A lot of people seem to say it's this year, right? But that's what he means. If you could know that moment and figure it out, you could translate it into a moment in the future and figure out when Mashiach is supposed to come, the final moment by which Mashiach should come, the Itam moment, the last possible moment. So this is tremendously important. It changes everything. I mean, how many people walking the streets out there have any idea whatsoever whether or not that is anything more significant about this period of time than what you read in the newspapers, than what the president's saying, what the prime minister's saying, what's happening over here? Why are the events of history going the way they're going? Is it random? Is it simply political maneuvering that we can't quite control? Things are out of going their own way, or is there an undercurrent So it turns out there's a few undercurrents that actually overlap, intersect, and they have everything to say about the direction of Jewish history, and knowing them changes everything. Everything. This is the first one, the 10th hour of the 6th millennium. We have now been, for 22 years, in a period of time that corresponds to the 10th hour of day 6, when Adam Arishon ate from the Eitz Das Torah. It's not a coincidence, and that's what we'll see B'ezras Hashem later on, that 1990, called the Persian Gulf War, and a lot of things happening, the implosion of Russia, and all major events taking place just before, during, and after 1990 was a tremendously important watershed year that most people just wrote off and went weiter and left behind. History certainly changed. The World Trade Center attack was just an offshoot, was just the result of all this change taking place, going back to 1990. But if you don't know it's supposed to change, if you don't know the basis for that change, you don't know the symptoms of what's going on below the skin causing that change, then basically, a little blemish on the skin, a little pimple, a little, something happening, it's just, you watch it and hope it will go away. But maybe it's symptomatic of something more serious. If a person has, for example, a propensity, God forbid, they're famine to cancer, and they see certain signs, they run to the doctor for everything. Many things could be nothing, but they go anyhow. You know why? Because they're primed. For them, it's real. These signs can mean something. If you don't know the undercurrent exists, you're not going to look at the events of 1990 in any significant way, in any important way. And they'll come and they'll go. And you just keep scratching your head. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why is anti-Semitism increasing? Why is there pressure on Israel? Why is the world siding with the Palestinians instead? What's behind all this hashgacha pratis? So the answer is, stage 1, the 10th hour of day 6. That changed everything. And B'ezras Hashem, we'll see the other factors later on.